So what I've got here is a really cheap sat nav. It's Navigon, and it's a few years old now, but I think even when this was purchased back 3, maybe even 4 years ago, it only cost about £35–40. So you could probably pick one of these up really cheap off eBay now. It's not a big screen, it's not like a modern widescreen one, and for a while now I've upgraded the one in my car, so I don't use this, and it's been lying around in the workshop for a while. So what I thought about doing is actually taking the guts out of this and transplanting it into an original Game Boy case, just to give a sat nav a bit of a retro feel, and it'll look quite unique. So when you open the sat nav up, there's not a lot to it. You've got a battery here and speakers screwed onto the back of the plastic housing. The motherboard comes away. It's connected to this LCD screen with a simple ZIF socket. You've got all the GPS workings under here, protected by cans for interference. The antenna is on the back of the PCB here. You've got a micro SD card there for software updates, and USB port here for charging the actual unit up when it's in the car. So there's not a great deal to it at all. So what I thought I'd do first is remove the LCD from this housing, and then I can use this housing here as a template to cut out a bigger space here to fit the LCD into the Game Boy. Now I'm hoping I don't have to cut too much away from the top and the bottom, because I would really like to leave the Game Boy logo in place. So for cutting this out, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a marker. I'm going to mark off where I'm going to cut out first, and then I'm going to use my Dremel with a cutting wheel, and then carefully cut this rectangle shape out, and then use a file and a bit of emery paper and trying to get it as smooth as I possibly can. So I've got the rectangle cut out for the LCD, so I'm happy with that at the minute, and I'm now moving on to the actual motherboard of the GPS sat nav itself. And at the moment I'm going to have to mount it this way here in order so I can still connect the ribbon cable up on the LCD, but it's a little bit too wide. So looking at this motherboard here, we can do a little bit of trimming on the sides without affecting any of the electronics. So hopefully it will still be a tight fit, but it should just fit in there quite nicely. So I've ground down the sides of the PCB, and now it fits into the Game Boy chassis, into the frame of the Game Boy, and I've also desoldered the reset switch that was here, and I may or may not actually add another tactile switch to take over that reset switch, because the solder points are still there, so I can still solder onto them, because I took it off because it was actually catching when I was grinding this side down. So I just removed it because I don't think I've ever used it anyway. Also, we've got the tactile switch here that turns the unit on and off. Now if you hold the unit down for if you hold the switch down for 3 seconds, it will actually turn the sat nav on, and once the sat nav's turned on, if you hold it down, I think it is for 5 seconds, maybe 8 seconds, it turns it off. So what I'm doing, I've left this tactile switch in place and I've bypassed it with these 2 wires here. So it's a simple test to make sure you got your soldering correct on this tactile switch here, where if you just connect it up to your multimeter on continuity mode and then press the button down, it will make contact. So I know the soldering on that's fine, so I can move on now. So I've changed my mind again, and I've actually mounted this motherboard as it was originally intended on the back of the LCD. That's how it was originally mounted in its original case here. Now the reason I've done that is because it was just going to fit on the end here. Because of this curve, it was going to be a really tight fit, and I was possibly going to have to ground down that corner there, which I didn't want to. So I've put it in the back there, and it's fit quite snugly as well. The other consideration was that by turning this motherboard into that direction and having the ribbon cable laying flat. This antenna here would have been pointing into the car instead of how it was intended to point out of the windscreen, so there might have been connection issues by doing that. So we've got it laid this way, and it should work out a lot better as far as connections concerned. Also, I've cut a little notch in here for the SD card, so we can insert the SD card there, and that's come out quite well. So what I'm going to be doing next, I'm going to be gluing the buttons in here and the actual joypad here. I'm going to glue all those in, and I'm going to have to extend the battery wires, extend the speaker wire, so we can mount the speaker here originally where it would have been in the Game Boy. So extend those wires across there, and also have a look at the battery, where we're going to put the battery. I mean, we'll probably end up putting some double-sided sticky tape on there and having it where it was originally, because there's enough space to put it in there at the minute. So by doing this as well, we now don't have to modify this battery compartment, so that's good. I've glued in all these switches here, and I've also glued down the speaker and extended the speaker wires, just put some shrink wrap around them like that. So I've tacked the screen in just using some hot glue. Good thing about hot glue is it's strong enough to hold it in place, but if I ever need to take it out again in the future, it's still soft and easy enough to remove to take the screen out without damaging it. Now it's time to connect the motherboard up and put that into place. So that seats in there quite nicely, and I can get to that SD card slot. Okay, so what I'm going to work on now is the power adapter, and also figure out what I'm going to do with the on-off switch up here. So there's plenty of room there to connect the speaker up, and also the battery. Like I said, I think what I'm going to do is just double-sided sticky tape and connect it up there like so. There should be plenty of room in the back here. So I'm just gluing the on-off switch in place. Just using a little bit of hot glue should be sufficient. So the on-off switch, I've used the original one here, but it no longer is a slide, it's a push-in tactile switch. Hopefully you can hear that. So now we've got to this stage, I think it'd be a good idea if we applied some power and just tested it, make sure that the touchscreen and all the functions work before we carry on with the rest of it. So I've got the power hooked up to my bench power supply, so we'll just push the switch and hopefully it'll turn on. The speaker's working as well, so that's a good sign. And touchscreen's working fine, so we'll carry on with the rest of the build now. This connector was actually at an angle, at a right angle, and it was taking up too much room on here, so I've deconstructed it and chopped away that angle in order so we can lay it flat, and got rid of the rubber so we got more space, so less likely to have to chop away at the Game Boy case anymore. Although looking at this, we're probably going to have to make a little cutout here on the Game Boy, maybe, I don't know, maybe widen that a little bit more. So this is how I got around the problem of having to solder directly onto the USB port here, which is really small. The solder pads for it are absolutely tiny. So like I've showed you, I've deconstructed this, taken the two wires, the power wires that go into the USB port that comes with the sat nav, and I've connected them to a little jack socket. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue that in place down here, and on the power cable for the car charger I've put a little power jack socket on there, and we can just connect it up from the bottom like so. So I've fitted in the new power jack plug down there, and I've just held it in place with some hot glue. I did have to cut a corner out here in the battery compartment in order to fit over this USB port here, and I also had to cut away the housing that the old speaker jack plug used to fit into in order to get some clearance over the top of this power jack. So just checking it now, and it all fits together quite nicely. Now for the holes in here where you can see the connectors from the original Game Boy, what I've done is I've cut away some of the connectors and I'm going to glue them in place just to fill up those gaps. So we've got a volume switch here, and I'll just glue it in like so, just as a dummy switch like we've got on the front. So I've modified the windscreen mount off the old Navigon Sat Nav here, and I've cut off the tabs. There were tabs at the top and bottom that clip on over the Sat Nav and hold it in place. So what I've done, I've cut them away, and I'm left with this circular surface here, and I'm going to use the battery compartment of the Game Boy and epoxy it to the back there, and then to add and remove the Game Boy Sat Nav, we can just unclip it using the battery compartment, leaving the battery compartment in place on the bracket here. So this is the bracket now, and I've epoxied it on there like I said, so you can just clip it on like so and then take it off quite easily. So these are the buttons I've just put in to cover the gaps. That's the SD card reader. I just blocked off the DC port there, and like I said, cut some of the wheels off just to add a bit of authenticity to it. So I think all that's left now is to give it a test.
Please bear right in 100 yards, then immediately turn right.
Catch you next time.